Amateurs? Oh yes. We'll stick them on 200 meters and below. They'll never get out of their backyard with that. Hey folks, welcome to the 1950s Radio Amateur Handbook review. This might take forever or a couple videos and I'll be sick of it. But anyway, let's start off with Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Amateur Radio. So they kind of start off, at the time, I think there were 100,000 amateur radio operators in 1950, with 80,000 of them being in the United States. That's not much, but in the 50s, that was considered a large number. But it's interesting. I like reading how they used to write and think, you know, from some of this dogma. The old QST magazines, like from the 1915 and 16, I'll do some stuff on those too. There just was a different way of writing. You know, they assumed everybody was loyal to the government and owed their allegiance to the ARRL. It's really funny to read, but it's interesting, I think. So if you're not a ham radio enthusiast, Hiram Percy Maxim, he was like 1AW, the W1AW. So W1AW is history. It's kind of like Bill W and AA, you know. So Hiram Percy Maxim was like the Bill W of amateur radio, I guess. I don't know, it's probably a weird thing to say, but you can go to, I think it's Newington, Connecticut, and see it's the house where he operated out of. I don't think it's the original house where he lived, and you probably have that too, but so here's our grandfather of ham radio right here, Hiram Percy Maxim, and it's in the first page of the book. So it's kind of funny because like the ARRL, they probably were mirroring FCC kind of description of what an amateur radio operator really is. But they always seem to kind of stress the amateur has a station that's, you know, that's technically correct and doesn't, you know, cause any problems to anybody else. Ham radio operators in the day and still now operate on kind of, well, you know, we can do high power, 1,000 watts, or is it 1,500 watts? You know, that's pretty high power that can generate an RF, an EMF, or radiation that can be harmful to human beings. So I mean, you know, so back in these days, in the 50s, we're talking vacuum tubes and a lot of high voltage stuff everywhere. I mean, we're talking deadly, like thousands of volts that are needed to keep the vacuum tubes running, especially the finals. Well, TVs had it too. All the technology with tubes was all high voltage transformers. But here's what's interesting right here. This is really funny. Although as old as the art of radio itself, amateur radio did not always enjoy such prestige. Its first enthusiasts were private citizens of an experimental turn of mind whose imaginations went wild when Marconi first proved that messages could be sent by wireless. Regulation was needed. I think what they're saying here is before it was like cowboys, bing bang boom, cowboys and Indians, you know, like everybody was just doing whatever they wanted to do when there was no rules and regulations, typical human beings, you know. So they must have had people putting up stations, big giant antennas running thousands of volts, running high power all over the place, and there must have been some problems, you know, like people getting executed, I don't know. So right away, it says here by 1912, they had to get the government involved to regulate these crazy people. So, I mean, I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm just kind of doing the highlights, which is kind of interesting. You know, on ham radio, we have all the ham bands, 160 meters all the way through the HF spectrum into the VHF. But it's kind of fun and interesting to read about, like this one here where it goes, what about those undisturbed wavelengths below 200 meters? The engineering world thought they were worthless, but they had said that about 200 meters. So in 1922, tests between Hartford and Boston were made on 130 meters with encouraging results. Like they just assumed that, you know, some of these frequencies were just you can't do anything with them. I mean, under 200 meters, we're talking about huge antennas, but ham radio people proved them wrong, I guess. I don't know. So just the actual beginning of shortwave. Just a little paragraph about that. Guys operating around 100 meters would have been like, whatever. Maybe that was close to 80 meters, I don't know. But it just talks about here that they proved that you could do communications across the Atlantic Ocean in shortwave. That's kind of what they're saying, the shortwave era began. So where did shortwave come from? Well, it came in 1923 when these experiments started and they realized, well, we can transmit signals across the ocean and communicate. So that's pretty interesting, I think. But once again, they go on to explain how once this was discovered, it kind of went berserko. A lot of stations, I think it was talking about commercial stations, they say chaos threatened until the first series of national radio conferences petitioned various bands. So I guess it was like a mad rush to just do whatever the hell you want to do. Oh, we can do all this, we can communicate back and forth. And of course there were no rules and regulations, and all this stuff went completely berserko from what I'm reading here. Let's put radio stations on the air, screw everybody, my station's more important than yours. There must have been a lot of QRM back in those days. In 1924, all that stuff that was going on. So 1924, it looks like they're saying that's when the 80, 40, 20, and 10 meter band, even 5 meters, were partitioned or began. So that's a little history on where the ham bands started, I guess. I don't know. To me, when the little bit I'm reading and blabbing I'm doing, with the little bit of reading I'm doing and all this, kind of explains kind of how it started. Maybe all the handbooks do, but I'm reading this one, so that's what I'm finding. It talks about public service, technical developments. This is 1950, and there's quite a bit to read. The ARRL had a laboratory, so they must have been doing a lot of testing, and so maybe there's a lot to be considered about the ARRL back in these days. Like I say, they have a lot of history in our hobby here and experimentation, and maybe kind of trying to put some focus on this hobby. I think maybe the ARRL was, an organization that realized how cool of a hobby this is, that just anybody can do, providing you kind of learn what's going on, get your license, wanted to maybe protect and also, do the science and engineering and keeping this hobby up to date and with the highest technical discoveries possible. But this is all old stuff. I think it's really interesting, and so we can go on and on about all of this, and I should probably read more of this. It's a lot to read. But one thing I like about these old manuals is the illustrations. It's the old hand-drawn illustrations. I always really think this is amazing. And since my profession is in the, drafting, we don't draw shit like this. It's all computerized drawing. But just the fact that you can, that they drew this by hand, this always amazed me. So when I go to the Half Price bookstore, that's this book here in St. Paul or whatever, I'm always looking for older books on all kinds of stuff, like technical books, because the illustrations to me are freaking awesome. I don't know, I'm probably a weirdo, but I think the stuff's cool. So there you go, folks. Just I'm not trying to get too into this book. It's a thick-ass book. There's a lot in here, but just kind of doing my fun little book review here, and showing you a few things back in the good old days. 73 from CLG. Have a good day.